All right, so continuing on with part 3, we've finished our DNS side of it, and that went pretty good. And so now we're going to move into the DHCP side of it. And our goal with this series of videos and this week's project is to just get DHCP installed and functional. And then next week we're going to go ahead and create a reservation for Windows 10. We don't want to create a reservation for our firewall, pfSense, our firewall router. That needs a static address. And we don't want to create a reservation for Server1. Servers need a static address. But Windows 10 is a good client to create a reservation for. All right, now I've got this in our notes, but it's really for next week's work. And in the notes, what I've got here is just that in order to do the reservation for Windows 10, I need some information. To do my IPv4 reservation, I need the MAC address. It's real easy to get. Actually, you can get all three of these by going over to the Windows 10 machine and doing an ipconfig/all. And you can copy and paste those, which is really handy because you can see that the do-it number is really long. So I did an ipconfig/all, and then with my mouse and in the command prompt, I copied and I pasted into a text file this information, which will make it easy for me to use when I go to create that reservation. But we're a little bit ahead of the game there. That's not this week, but you need those values: the MAC address for IPv4, the DOIT and the IAD values for IPv6. Now the MAC address never changes. The MAC address is hardware specific, but the DOIT and the IAD values, those will change with each installation of an operating system. They're not hardware specific, they're installation specific. So like, if you do reservations for IPv4 and you base it off the MAC address, you can install a different operating system on that machine and your reservation is still valid. But that's only for IPv4. IPv6, you'll have to create a reservation every time that you install a new operating system. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to do here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to create an IPv4 scope and an IPv6 scope. And we're giving some values here that the leasable addresses, the ones that I want to make available out of my IPv4 network ID, is I want .110 to 199 is leasable. All right, so I want 89 addresses leasable. Sounds good. Looking down at IPv6, I'm using the same values, and it's a little bit of a trickiness here. And I wanted to mention this because some of you might be wondering about this. This is a base 10 number, right? Base 10, in other words, digits 0 through 9. This is a hex number. So really, even though I'm saying ::110 to ::199, that's more than 89 addresses because we've got the letters A, B, C, D, E, and F to account for, and so we get more than what we would with IPv4. I just mentioned that because sometimes our minds think that way. We look at that and something doesn't seem quite right. So I'll just tell you right off, even though they're the same values, it's not the same number of addresses. Once we create those scopes, we're going to go in and create some scope options. Okay. And you can see for IPv4, we've got 3 of them. And for IPv6, we just have 2. All right. So let's go ahead then and get started with this. Again, there's a lot of notes here, but it's really pretty straightforward. DNS and DHCP are just a common to everyday business, and we work with them all the time. Everybody needs DHCP, everybody needs DNS. All right, so here we go. Now the good news is that I am seeing the green circles with the white checks, which tells me the server is, the DHCP service is functional. If there was an Active Directory domain involved, we would have to authorize this server, and it would have an authorize button here. Okay, now it says manage authorized servers, but there is not an Active Directory involved, and so there is no DHCP authorization. Therefore, we get the green with the white checks right away. If Active Directory was involved, these would be red. They would not be functional. Okay, I just want to point that out. So the way that I create a scope is I right-click on it and I say New Scope. And the name here, you can name it how you'd like. I'm going to say that this is CDA net, and it's 192.168.50.0. And I like to put as much information I can into my names when I name things. And then down here in the description, I'm going to say it's .110 to .199 leasable. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, starting address and ending address, 192.168.50.110 is my starting address, and 192.168.50.199 as my ending address. Now, when we taught this in class, we did talk about that through the years, Microsoft has had different best practices about, what addresses do you have as starting end, and then do you exclude addresses you don't wish to lease. And right now, the school of thought is if you've got a block, a straight block like we have here, just identify it. And that's what we've got. We've just got a straight block, .110 to 199 leasable. Now, if later on, if we need to make exclusions, for some reason or other, there's some devices that need to fit within that range, and we don't want our DHCP server offering those as address leases, then we would add the exclusion here. And you can add exclusions later. You can come back and say, oh, I need to exclude an address. I put in a wireless access point, or I did this, or I did that. Okay. If you make reservations, like a DHCP reservation that falls within the scope, the reserved address is excluded automatically. Okay. Lease duration, we're going to go with defaults. Again, when we taught this, we talked about different reasons to make the lease duration longer or shorter. Here we're given the option to configure those options we talked about, and let's go ahead and do them. Okay, the first one is router, and router is option 003. It doesn't tell us that just yet, but you'll see that in a minute. Now we're doing IPv4, and so this is going to be when we give out an address from this server, what is its default gateway? So default gateway noted at the top there, or router. For me, it's 192.168.50.1. Go ahead and add that. I'm good. What's my next one? DNS. It pre-filled information that it knew. I could change it, but it says, hey, you've already identified this domain, or excuse me, sorry about that, not a domain. You've identified this server as having a fully qualified domain name that includes cancun.sitelabs.net. So it grabbed that for me, and it identified what I have set for a DNS server. Now, it doesn't always do this. It depends on what you've got configured, and so you can just as easily type them in. Now, it's getting two values here. The domain name is option 015, and the DNS server is option 006. Let's go ahead and accept these. We're not using a Win server. And do we want to activate the scope? Yes, we do. Okay, now let me show you the scope options. Okay, actually I have to expand the scope. Here they are. This is where we get those values, and those values they're not Microsoft specific. They spill over to other vendors. So 003 is, everyone understands 003, 006, 015. Those are very common to put into your DHCP lease package. Now there are more than one place to identify those options. I've identified the options on the scope. Let me use the pen here to show that to you. So if we kind of group this all together, okay. You can also identify options at a higher level. Let me get rid of that. Okay, we can identify options at the server level. That's right here. That would apply to all scopes. And then the last place is that when you do a reservation, reservations can have their own unique scope option values. And I didn't mean to exclude the fact that IPv6 down here also has scope options. Okay, so we've got our IPv4 scope done. Yeah, it was really that straightforward. Now, we don't have anybody asking for addresses, so we're not going to see anything here yet. That's how we're going to test this. We'll go over to Windows 10, and we'll tell Windows 10, okay, it's time now to convert from being statically assigned to being dynamically assigned. And then when we dynamically assign it, then we would look we would look that Windows 10 gets an address, and then we would come here and look and see, we would see it listed as being given out. Now this video is already at 9 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And then we'll pick up right here, and we'll go down to IPv6 and create that scope, and then go over to Windows 10 and to test.